How I was kicked out of my home and almost became homeless for a crime I didn't commit. I grew up in what I thought was a loving family. My parents, Sarah and Tom, were strict but fair, always emphasizing the importance of honesty and trust. My younger sister, Emma, and I were close, despite our occasional sibling squabbles. We lived in a small, tight-knit community where everyone knew everyone, and I always felt secure and supported at home. That all changed a few months ago. It started when some money went missing from my dad's office. He works from home, and he's always been meticulous about his finances. He keeps his earnings in a small safe in his office until he deposits it in the bank. One day, he noticed that $500 was missing. My parents were livid, and I understood why. $500 was a significant amount for us. They immediately assumed that someone in the house had taken it. At first, they approached Emma and me calmly, asking if we had seen the money or if we knew anything about it. I was shocked that they would even think we'd take it, but I understood their concern. Emma and I both denied any involvement. I thought that would be the end of it, that they'd realize it must have been a mistake or maybe even a glitch with the safe. But things quickly took a darker turn. The next day, I came home from school to find my mom and dad waiting for me in the living room, their expressions grim. My heart sank. Something was seriously wrong. "Sit down, Alex," my dad said, his voice cold and unfamiliar. I sat down, confused and scared. "What's going on?" My mom handed me an envelope. I opened it and found $500 in cash. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. I didn't recognize the envelope, and I had no idea how the money had gotten there. "Why was this in your room?" my dad demanded. I stared at the money, stunned.
I don't know," I stammered.
"I didn't take it, I swear." My parents didn't believe me. They insisted that the money had been hidden under my mattress, as if I had stolen it and then tried to hide it. No matter how much I protested, they wouldn't listen. My dad's face was a mask of anger and disappointment, and my mom just looked at me with tears in her eyes. "How could you do this, Alex?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We raised you better than this." I was at a loss for words. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. How could they believe that I would steal from them? I had never stolen anything in my life. I tried to reason with them, to make them see that this was some kind of misunderstanding. But they were convinced of my guilt. "You have to leave," my dad said suddenly, his tone final and unyielding. My heart dropped into my stomach. "What? No, Dad, please." "You heard me," he interrupted. "Pack your things and go. We can't have a thief under our roof." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own parents were kicking me out of the house for something I didn't do. I tried one last time to plead my case, but they wouldn't budge. It was like they had already decided I was guilty, and nothing I said would change their minds. In a daze, I went to my room and packed a small bag. I didn't have much time to think. I just grabbed some clothes, my phone, and a few personal items. I didn't know where I would go or what I would do, but I couldn't stay where I wasn't wanted. As I walked out the door, my mom handed me the envelope with the money. "Take it," she said. "You're going to need it." Her words cut me deeper than anything else. It was as if she was acknowledging that I was on my own now, that they had washed their hands of me. I wanted to throw the money back at her, to scream that I didn't want anything from them, but I knew I'd need it to survive. I left without saying goodbye to Emma. I didn't want her to see me like that, and I was afraid that if I tried to explain, she'd just believe what our parents had told her. As I walked down the street, the reality of what had just happened started to sink in. I was homeless, alone, and accused of something I didn't do. The first few nights were rough. I spent them on a friend's couch, too ashamed to tell anyone the truth about why I had been kicked out. I lied and said I had a falling out with my parents over something trivial, but I knew I couldn't stay there forever. Eventually, I found a cheap room to rent, and I started working part-time jobs to make ends meet. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me afloat. Every day was a struggle. I couldn't focus on anything, my mind constantly replaying the events that led to my exile. I wondered if my parents ever doubted their decision. If they missed me at all. I considered trying to prove my innocence, but I didn't even know where to start. The betrayal and pain were too fresh, and I was too broken to face them again. A few weeks after I left, I received a text from Emma. She said she missed me and wanted to see me. I was hesitant at first, afraid she would just confront me about the money, but I agreed to meet her at a park near our house. When I saw her, I was flooded with emotion. She was the only family I had left. We talked for a while, mostly small talk, but then she brought up the incident. "Alex, I know you didn't take the money," she said softly. I believe you. Her words were a balm to my wounded soul, but they also filled me with rage. Then why didn't you say anything? I demanded. Tears welled up in her eyes. I was scared, she admitted. I didn't know what to do. But I think I know who took it. I stared at her, my heart pounding. Who? She hesitated, glancing around as if afraid someone might overhear. It was Michael, she whispered. Michael was our cousin, a troubled kid who had been staying with us for a few weeks while his parents dealt with some personal issues. He had a history of getting into trouble, shoplifting, skipping school, but I never imagined he would do something like this. But the more Emma explained, the more it made sense. Michael had been in the house the day the money went missing. He had access to all of our rooms, and he had disappeared shortly after I was kicked out. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal. Not only had Michael stolen from us, but he had let me take the fall for it. I wanted to confront him, to make him confess to my parents, but I knew it wouldn't be that simple. He was long gone, and I had no proof. Emma promised to help me clear my name, but I wasn't sure how much it would matter. Even if we could prove Michael was the thief, the damage was done. My parents had already shown me where their loyalties lay, and it wasn't with me. I wasn't sure I could ever forgive them for what they had done, for how easily they had turned their backs on me. In the end, I decided to let it go. I couldn't go back to that house, to a family that had cast me out so easily. I needed to move forward, to build a life for myself away from the shadow of their betrayal. It wasn't easy, but I found a new sense of strength in the struggle. I realized that I didn't need their approval, their validation. I could survive on my own. But the pain never fully went away. The scars from that day are still there, a constant reminder of the family I lost. I've moved on, but every now and then, I wonder if they ever think about me, if they ever regret what they did. But I guess I'll never know. As time passed, I slowly rebuilt my life. I found a stable job and eventually moved into a small apartment. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and that gave me a sense of pride. I started going to therapy, where I began to unpack the trauma of what had happened. My therapist helped me understand that I couldn't control other people's actions, only my own. That realization was both liberating and heartbreaking. Emma stayed in touch, and she would occasionally update me on our parents. I could tell she wanted us to reconcile, but I wasn't ready. The wounds were still too fresh, the betrayal too deep. Every time I thought about facing them, I felt a knot of anger and sadness in my chest. One day, about a year after I was kicked out, Emma called me with surprising news. Michael had been arrested for a string of burglaries in a nearby town. When the police searched his belongings, they found items that had been reported stolen from our house, small things that my parents hadn't even noticed were missing. It was the proof I had been waiting for, but it didn't bring the relief I expected. When Emma told our parents, they were devastated. They called me, both of them crying, begging for forgiveness. They said they were sorry, that they had been wrong to accuse me. My dad even offered to let me move back home, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't go back to a place where I had been so easily discarded. I listened to their apologies, but the words felt hollow. The pain of their betrayal had etched itself into my heart, and no amount of regret on their part could erase that. I told them that I needed time to heal, time to figure out if I could ever forgive them. In the days that followed, I struggled with my feelings. Part of me wanted to forgive them, to rebuild the family I had lost, but another part of me felt that I could never fully trust them again. How could I go back to being their son after everything that had happened? How could I pretend that things could ever be the same? I started spending more time with Emma. She was my bridge to the past, and I found comfort in her unwavering belief in me. She never pushed me to reconcile with our parents, but I could tell that she wanted it. She talked about how different they were now, how they regretted what they had done and how they wanted to make things right. Eventually, after months of soul-searching, I agreed to meet with them. We decided to have dinner at a neutral place, a small restaurant in town where we could talk without the weight of our history bearing down on us. When I saw them, they looked older, more worn down by the events of the past year. I could see the guilt in their eyes, and for the first time, I realized that they had suffered too. The dinner was awkward at first. We made small talk, avoiding the elephant in the room, but eventually, my dad broke the silence. "Alex," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "we know we can't undo what we did. But we want you to know how truly sorry we are. We let our fear and anger cloud our judgment, and we hurt you in ways we can't ever take back. We've thought about it every day since you left, and we'll regret it for the rest of our lives." My mom, who had been quietly dabbing at her eyes, reached across the table to take my hand. We were wrong, Alex. We see that now. We see how much we hurt you, and we're so sorry, she said, her voice trembling. We can't expect you to forgive us, but we want to do whatever it takes to make it right. We love you, and we miss you every day. I sat there, feeling the weight of their words, the sincerity in their voices. For so long, I had been carrying this anger, this sense of betrayal, and now I was faced with the reality of their remorse. It was overwhelming, and I didn't know how to respond. After a long pause, I finally spoke. I appreciate what you're saying, I began slowly. But what happened? It changed everything. You didn't just kick me out of the house, you kicked me out of our family. I needed you to believe in me, and you didn't. That's not something I can just forget. My dad nodded, his eyes full of sorrow. We know, Alex. We know we failed you. And we don't expect things to go back to the way they were. We just hope that, in time, you can find it in your heart to let us back into your life, even if it's in a different way. There was a part of me that wanted to hold on to my anger, to punish them for the pain they had caused me. But another part of me, the part that still loved them despite everything, wanted to let go of the bitterness. I realized that holding on to the past was only hurting me more. I don't know what the future holds, I said, my voice steadier now. But I'm willing to try. I can't promise that things will ever be the same, but maybe we can find a new way forward. My parents both nodded, a mixture of relief and sadness on their faces. It wasn't the full reconciliation they might have hoped for, but it was a start. It was a chance to begin healing, however long that might take. Over the next few months, we took small steps toward rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't easy, there were still moments of tension, of unspoken hurt, but we kept trying. I stayed in my apartment, continuing to build my own life, but we started having regular dinners, and slowly, the walls between us began to come down. Emma was a constant presence, always encouraging and supportive. She never took sides, but she made it clear that she wanted our family to heal. With her help, we started to find a new normal, a different kind of family dynamic that, while scarred, was still rooted in love. It took time, more time than I had imagined, but eventually, the rawness of the betrayal began to fade. I learned to forgive, not because they deserved it, but because I needed it. Forgiving them allowed me to move on, to let go of the pain that had been holding me back. In the end, we weren't the same family we once were. We were something different, something more fragile but perhaps more honest. There were still moments when I would look at them and feel a pang of what we had lost, but those moments became fewer as time went on. I realized that family isn't just about the good times, it's also about how you weather the storms together. We had been through one of the hardest storms imaginable, and though we were battered and bruised, we had come out the other side still standing, still connected. The scars of that time will always be there, a reminder of how easily trust can be broken and how hard it is to rebuild. But they're also a reminder of strength, of resilience, and of the power of forgiveness. I don't know if we'll ever fully heal, but I do know that we're trying. And sometimes, that's enough. As time passed, the tentative steps my family and I took toward reconciliation began to solidify. We weren't just trying anymore, we were actively rebuilding, brick by brick, the trust that had been shattered. The process was neither linear nor easy, but each shared meal, each conversation, sometimes awkward, sometimes profound, was a step in the right direction. My relationship with my parents gradually transformed. The bitterness that had once consumed me started to dissipate, replaced by a cautious hope. They worked hard to show that they were committed to earning back my trust. They didn't just offer words of apology, they made efforts to understand me, to listen, and to support the life I was trying to build on my own. One day, after several months of slow but steady progress, my dad invited me to lunch at a small cafe downtown. As we sat down, he seemed nervous, a side of him I wasn't used to seeing. "There's something I've been meaning to say, Alex," he began, fiddling with the edge of his napkin. "I know that what happened. It changed everything. I can't change the past, and I know that the damage I caused might never fully heal. But I want you to know that I'm proud of you, of how you've handled everything, of the person you've become despite everything we put you through." His words struck a chord deep within me. For so long, I had yearned for this acknowledgement, this validation that I was more than the sum of that one terrible event. I didn't need my parents' approval to define my worth, but hearing it still brought a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. "Thanks, Dad," I replied quietly, meeting his gaze. "I'm trying to move forward, and I'm glad we're in a better place now." Our conversation that day marked a turning point. It didn't erase the past, but it allowed me to let go of the residual anger I had been carrying. I no longer needed to keep my parents at arm's length, And in letting them back into my life more fully, I found that I was able to heal more completely. As for Emma, our bond only grew stronger. She had been my anchor throughout everything, and I made sure she knew how much her support had meant to me. We spent more time together, rekindling the sibling relationship that had always been a source of comfort for both of us. Eventually, I even found it within myself to visit the family home. The house felt different, more fragile, yet somehow more honest. We had all changed, and so had the space we once shared. It wasn't just a house anymore, it was a testament to what we had endured and what we had managed to rebuild. One evening, as we all sat together in the living room, my mom brought out an old photo album. She opened it to a picture of our family from years ago, taken during a happier, simpler time. As we looked through the photos, sharing memories and laughter, I realized that while our family had been irrevocably altered, we had also found a way to come together again, stronger in our vulnerability. We were still a family, not because we had erased the past, but because we had confronted it, accepted it, and chosen to move forward together. The scars were there, but they were a part of our story now, a story that included pain, betrayal, and loss, but also growth, resilience, and a renewed commitment to each other. As I looked around at my parents and sister, I knew that we would continue to face challenges, that there would still be moments of difficulty and doubt. But I also knew that we had come too far, fought too hard, to ever let anything break us again. We weren't perfect, but we were still standing. And in that, I found a sense of peace. We had lost so much, but we had also found something new, a deeper, more honest connection that, in its own way, was just as valuable as what we had before. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt ready to embrace it, knowing that whatever came next, we would face it together. And that was enough.